What's going on, everyone? It's Ben with YGO from Zero, back with another duel from SDYK format, a duel going specifically out to you degenerates in the audience who enjoy watching Stall Mill take names. So, here we have it. The best deck in the format, in my opinion. And we saw it defeat Tribute Aggro yesterday, which I think is probably its best matchup. And we're going to see it go up against Conga line aggro today, which I think is honestly a similar level of matchup to it. Because I think all of the worm decks, all the Wicked Worm Beast aggro decks, really do suffer against this card destruction deck. Because it's just an extra card that they have to have in hand. There are ways to play around it. If you set a Wicked Worm Beast, then, it doesn't bounce back to hand, but you're also not able to use it to attack in. And if the Stall Mill deck ever uses Swords of Revealing Light on a set Wicked Worm Beast, then that Wicked Worm Beast will return to the hand eventually. So I think honestly that Wicked Worm Beast decks have a bad matchup against Stall Mill, despite having a good matchup against a lot of other aggro decks. So I'm going to show off how this deck does against Conga line aggro. And this will probably be the last of these sorts of duel videos. We will see if I'm able to rope someone into playing a sort of mill versus anti-mill match. I think that will be miserable, so I wouldn't get your hopes up. But this may be the last of the duels in this format. If you want to see more of these duels, if you'd like to see any matchups that I didn't cover, please let me know down in the comments, and I will be sure to try and make a duel video with them. But until then, let's just dive down into the deck breakdown and just explore what makes this deck so disgusting. Now, I already covered this in both the guide update video that I released a couple days ago, as well as the example duel video that I released yesterday, but let's just quickly go through the card by card for this deck again. So the goal for this deck again is to force your opponent to run out of cards in their deck and cause them to lose by deck out, mainly through using 3 copies of card destruction at the end of the game to just force them to draw out their entire deck, but also just through stalling them down, just wearing them down with your stall cards, forcing them to use up all their removal until they have none left, and just generally stalling them out. So to that end, all the monsters that we're playing are meant to either deprive our opponent of resources in some way, or just act as defenders that they can't get over. And all these monsters are best summoned out in the battle phase with Ultimate Offering. So we of course have the 2K Defenders. These are just incredibly good cards. We are using Spirit of the Heart, Mystical Elf, and Aqua Mator instead of something like Giant Soldier Stone, just because if our opponent Change of Hearts them, then this is less potential damage that we'd be taking from those attacks, although it probably doesn't matter in the end. We are also playing 3 Wall of Illusion, 3 Man-Eater Bug. These are great at just picking apart your opponent's board during their turn when they attack into it off of an Ultimate Offering. So these are just very good cards. And in the case of Wall of Illusion, it can actually put a card back into your opponent's hand, which then makes for more devastating card destruction later on. Speaking of card destruction, let's move on to the spells. So of course we have 3 copies of card destruction. This is really the card that makes this deck as viable as it is, because instead of having to wait 40 turns for your opponent's deck to run out, this card can really just force the issue in, let's say, 25 turns maybe, which, it's still a long time to wait, but it's a much more doable time to wait than before. We also have 3 Dark Hole, 3 Raigeki, 3 Fisher to just remove our opponent's monsters from the board, clear the way, and deprive them of resources. We have 3 Pot of Greed, and I mentioned this in the previous videos, but Pot of Greed is an interesting card. It can be used to draw deeper to get to your Ultimate Offerings if you're missing those, or just any of your other important stall pieces if you're missing those. But generally you want to save the Pot of Greeds to the end of the game to enable you to pull off the triple card destruction combo at the end which makes it serve a much more interesting role in this deck than in any other deck, which basically just uses it to just draw deeper into their deck and plays it right when they draw it. Lastly, we have 3 Swords Revealing Light just to stall out our opponent for a bit longer. Yes, Dispel exists in this format, but a lot of decks aren't main decking it, and even the ones that do are not generally running a bunch of copies. So I do think that Swords Revealing Light is most likely going to stick around for a couple turns most of the time when you play it, which is very good at just preventing your opponent from being able to press the offensive. Moving on to the traps, we have 3 trap holes, just great at getting rid of your opponent's monsters during their turn. One of the only ways to get rid of Wicked Worm Beast if you want to get rid of it. Just a very good card. We have 3 Ultimate Offerings, one of the just backbones of the deck in terms of stalling. Enables you to bring out defenders to block during your opponent's battle phase. Just a very, very good card. And we have through Boku, just an incredible, incredible card to stall and prevent us from dying with our opponent's major offensive pushes. So that's going to do it for the main deck. For the side deck, again, we can smokescreen side into just worm control. Just side out all our 2K defenders, side out our card destructions, and side out our fishers. And we're basically playing worm control at full power. So this deck's incredibly good, both pre and post sideboarding. Just if you think your opponent isn't going to side in anti-stall tools, then you can keep it as the stall mill deck. If you think that your opponent is, then you can swap into worm control. And it's just an incredibly, incredibly good deck. So let's dive into the games to see it in action. Okay, we got a game here against Duck-Base Pill. They're running Conga line aggro. We're running stall mill. Let's see how it goes. We're going first, which is not bad for us. Honestly, this deck doesn't really care if it goes first or second. If it goes first, it can set up things like trap holes and ultimate offerings earlier than it would have otherwise. If it goes second, then their opponent is a card down. So, you know, it really can go either first or second, which makes it incredibly good. We draw a card destruction. Nice to have for later, but not really the best. We'll just set 2 bluffs and pass back to our opponent. They're going to draw 2, summon Battle Ox, Raigeki away our Mystical Elf, and just get in for 1,700 points of damage. They'll set 2 of their own and pass back to us. We're going to Pot of Greed to hopefully draw the Ultimate Offering, and we do in fact draw the Ultimate Offering, which is very nice. We're going to Fisher the Battle Ox, set the Ultimate Offering, and pass back to our opponent. They'll Pot of Greed themselves, summon a Battle Ox, and we will use Ultimate Offering here to set a Mystical Elf, and they're not even going to attack into it, just in case it's something like Wall of Illusion or something like that, which is fine by us. We'll just pass back to them. They're going to summon out Rogue Doll and just Raigeki away our monster, which is fair, and they're just going to try and attack in again. We luckily have another Spirit of the Harp, and they're just going to take 300. So back to us. We're fine with things how they are. Back to them. They can't do anything about the Spirit of the Harp. We're just staring at each other here, honestly. There's nothing really either side can do about this situation. Stall Mill doesn't really want to do anything about this situation. So they're just going to... Oh, that was a misclick on their part. That was the original card that they had set there. But they just misclicked in trying to set a monster. So they'll set 1, pass back to us. We'll draw Waboku, which is pretty good. We'll set that, pass back to them. They'll summon out Battle Ox, flip up a Great White, and they will Change of Heart our Spirit of the Heart, potentially getting in for a lot of damage here. Unfortunately for them, we will just Ultimate Offering, set another monster. It's a Spirit of the Heart. They will Reinforcements that, which is pretty good, but we can always just pay 500 more to set another Defender. They'll take 300 off that, and they do not have another Reinforcements. So that's going to be all from them. You could argue that we could have just used Wuboku here and saved our life points off the ultimate offering, saved our defenders in hand, and also made it easier to fire the trigger on Dark Hole because it would be a 2-for-4 trade as opposed to a 3-for-4 trade as it currently is. But the way I figure it is that they're likely going to have a board clear later on, and it's better to save the Wuboku for then, and then we can activate the Dark Hole after we have no monsters on the field and they have a bunch. But anyways, it's back to us. We'll switch the Spirit of the Harp to defense, pass back to them. They're going to pass back to us. And then we're just passing back and forth. They do have a stop defense, which is pretty rough for us because they will be able to get in for 900 points of damage here. But honestly, it's not the end of the world. It's just a little bit of damage. And we've got Wuboku Dark Hole in hand. We draw Pot of Greed, and we could activate it to draw deeper, but we don't actually want to do this. We're just going to set it for later when we're trying to arrange for our final push of decking them out. So we're just going to set it, pass back to them. Pass back to us. We have 7 cards in hand, so we will set a monster and pass back to them. They're just going to pass back to us. We have 7 cards in hand again, so we'll just discard the Ultimate Offering because it's kind of redundant in our hand. They pass back to us. We'll just set a Fisher since Fisher is very easy to use, so it's not really clogging up a spell or trap card zone. They'll just pass back to us, and we will just fire the Dark Hole here. We could have potentially just activated Fisher, set a Wuboku or something like that. But honestly, this is probably a bit better. This enables us to just do more. And the Dark Hole would basically never get used if things continued in this state. So we're just going to fire the Dark Hole here and hope for the best. It's a 3-for-4 trade, so not the best outcome, but we do have a Wuboku to set in its place, which is very good. Pass back to them. They'll bring out a Neo, attack in. We're just going to pay 5, set a Mystical Elf. They're going to run into the Mystical Elf, take 3, and we're back to stalemate. We'll just Fisher the Neo, pass back to them. They're going to activate Ultimate Offering and bring out a bunch of monsters. So they're going to bring out a Neo and a Rogue Doll. And they're going to Change of Heart our Mystical Elf, which is pretty rough. They're going to attack in. We're just going to Wuboku this because we're running low on life points for our Ultimate Offering activations. So we're just going to Wuboku. We drew Trap Hole, which is very good, and we have Swords. So we're just going to activate Swords to stall them for 3 more turns. They'll pass back to us. We'll pass back to them. They'll pass back to us. And we do just end our turn here, and we'll discard the Pot of Greed. We've already got 1 set, so if we need one later, we can just use it. But honestly, that Pot of Greed isn't doing us any good because we don't want to activate it anytime soon. And we've got the game already relatively under control, so we don't really need it. Pass back to them. They're going to set their last spell and trap card and pass back to us. So if we are able to triple card destruction them here, we actually do win the game. So we are just going to go for it. We're not going to put out any more of our cards from our hand because we want to draw as deep as possible into our deck to draw card destructions later on. So we're just going to both discard our hand and then draw the same amount of cards that we discarded. That last card I drew was not the same amount that I discarded. They have 7 cards in hand. We got very lucky having another card destruction. So we're just going to fire it and draw 5. And we do draw that last card destruction, and we do have less than 5 cards in hand. So this will actually work out perfectly. So we will just be able to win here, force them to deck out. So that's the sort of big push at the end of the duel that this deck aims to achieve. And you'll notice that, like, it actually did take some doing. If we had activated both this Pot of Greed and the other Pot of Greed we had in our graveyard earlier, then we could have potentially been forced to deck ourselves out with the card destructions. So it is something that you have to keep track of, just not just immediately firing the Pot of Greeds and only using them when they're absolutely necessary. In addition, you'll notice that our life points got pretty low with Ultimate Offering activations. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that you have to keep an eye on how your life points are doing at all times, more so than you would in a normal stall deck, because oftentimes this stall deck is stalling for a longer period of time. So these are good things to keep in mind with this deck, and I hope this showed how devastating this card destruction can be. Like, once their back row was filled, they couldn't really do much else. Sure, they could activate like a Reinforcements just to clear up a slot. Sure, they could activate a Waboku to clear up a slot. But, like, you're just forcing them to waste resources at that time, which just makes the sort of race to the finish even worse for them because they have less tools to deal with whatever you're bringing out. So it's just an incredibly hard place to put our opponent into. And it's why this deck is so devastating. But anyways, let's go into the second round because, again, we sided into our smokescreen aggro side. So let's see how the worm control side does against what the Conga line aggro is siding in. So we are going second this time. They're just going to bring out a Battle Lock, set a card. It's pretty good for them. We're doing pretty badly here. We do have a Lodge in to contest their Battle Locks, but they do have Reinforcements to get over the Lodge in, which is unfortunate. So we're kind of forced to activate Swords here and pass to them. They're going to bring out a Rogue Doll and just Dispel our Swords, which is pretty brutal. Just 3,300 damage right off the bat. And if this was a Stall Mill deck, I think that could have potentially just ended the game right there if that sequence of events happened, because we just might not have enough life points left to pay for the ultimate offerings. So it's a good thing that we sided into our worm control side deck. We're going to Dark Hole, clear their board, and then just set a Wall of Illusion, set a Raigeki as bluff, and pass back to them. They're going to stop defense our Wall of Illusion, which is pretty rough, as this does let them get in for more damage, and they will protect their Lodge in from any sort of removal. And they're also going to Swords of Revealing Light to prevent us from attacking in, which is all pretty rough. We'll just set a Man-Eater Bug, set a Reinforcements, and pass back to them. They'll bring out the Lodge in before activating Stop Defense on the Man-Eater Bug. They were clearly playing around Trap Hole here, hoping that this was just a regular defender. Unfortunately for them, it was not, so they will lose the Lodge in here. And we will just get to switch the Man-Eater Bug back to defense mode. They'll bring out a Great White to clear our Man-Eater Bug, but honestly, we're still feeling pretty good. We do actually have the Trap Hole there, so we are just going to Raigeki their Great White and pass back to them. Clear the way. And we do draw a backup beater. So we're feeling pretty good to bring out the Lodge in now. Bring out the Lodge in and attack. They'll set another card. We will summon out Wicked Worm Beast, attack in yet again. Get in for a lot of damage. Pass back to us. They'll bring out a Lodge in, which will Trap Hole. And they'll reveal that they have nothing to stop us. They just have 2 Reinforcements and an Ultimate Offering. So we were able to pull victory from the jaws of defeat with the Worm Control build here. They didn't really have any of their defensive tools left, it seems like. They went full aggro, which is, I think, the way to go mainly in this matchup if you're expecting the opponent to keep on the mill strategy. But here it came back to bite them because we sided into the worm control deck. So I think that this just shows how powerful the sort of smokescreen siding strategy can be and how degenerate this deck is. Like in both this match and in the match I showed off yesterday, this deck was just unstoppable. There was basically nothing that could be done. It was just horrifying. And it's so dominant. It's just a brutal deck. I think that it is format warpingly strong, and I think that there honestly aren't many ways to deal with it, as I mentioned in the update to the guide. There is an anti-mill deck in the format that I think can beat this mill deck pretty consistently because it just is targeted towards preventing mill from winning game one, and then if mill slides into the smokescreen aggro strategy, switching to mill itself to win games 2 and potentially 3. But that deck is just so bad. It loses to pretty much every other deck in the format, every other aggro deck in the format at least. And so it just is rough. There isn't really any good way to deal with this mill deck. Or maybe there is. Maybe I'm just not thinking of it. And if you can think of one, please let me know in the comments down below. But until next time, this has been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.